Somehow I always seem to start these things by wanting to wash Qubie, but here I am again. She just took us on a nice long trip. As you can kind of see, she's dirty as anything. A lot of bugs. We have been looking forward to this trip for a very long time. So let's take you back to the start of that. We got to get on the road, make a long trip up to Lafayette, Indiana. So let's get on the road. We're always super excited and relieved, actually, to finally be on the road for a trip in Qubie. It often feels like a lot of prep work is required before finally pulling out of the storage facility, so actually rolling down the road creates such a peaceful, relaxing feeling. That might sound a bit weird since I'm going to be driving for the next several hours, but I really love driving Qubie, which might sound at odds with the rest of this video. Our trip to Fayetteville, Indiana will be broken up into 2 days of travel, which, as it turns out, is quite fortunate given the traffic and delays we experienced trying to reach our overnight stay midway. We started joking with the GPS that if it said, "There's a delay ahead," one more time, I was going to toss it out the window. A planned 6-hour day of travel extended to almost 12 hours by the time we reached our stopping point, and that's where we'll pick things up again. It's been a very long travel day, but I couldn't be happier with where we ended up. This was just looking on a map, trying to split the trip between Raleigh and Lafayette, Indiana, and this place was about the only place that was about equidistant. And what a gem! I just can't get over it, right, hun?
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's incredible. I'm gonna have to take you for a little tour, but what was supposed to be about a 6-hour driving day turned into about a 10-hour driving day, so that makes for a long day. I'm gonna take a break and rest, but we'll catch you soon. So yeah, good morning. This is Valley Breeze Campground. Tell you, a little hidden gem. I can't get over how lovely and welcome it was to run into this thing last night. It's right off of the interstate. You kind of see it over there. That's I-64. But honestly, it was pretty quiet. Like, I didn't hear traffic much at all. But this is your entrance back through a nice drive. We've got about 10 back-end sites and maybe 4 or 5 pull-throughs. And we of course chose the one under those beautiful trees, but it's just adorable. It's so cute. This definitely feels like a labor of love. They take a lot of pride in keeping it well maintained. Look behind here, the view out of our window. Like, the buildings are older, but they're well painted, well kept. The little offices back there. It's just the cutest thing. So, again, not the worst thing in the world to find yourself at whenever you've had a long day on the road. Very welcome. So, we're packing up now. I'm about to do the thing that everyone loves the most in RVs and dump my tanks. Then we'll get on the road the rest of the way to Lafayette, Indiana, not Louisiana, Indiana. tell you what, one of the things that we found surprisingly pleasing when doing RV travel is lunch breaks at rest areas. Like, they're almost always really pretty. Like, I'll show you. Look outside here. We've got beautiful trees, nice grasses. And so, given how easy it is to navigate around Qubie with the slides closed, we just go back there, prepare our lunch, have a seat at the table, eat with nice surroundings, take a break, everybody can stretch their legs, go visit the restroom if we need to, and then back on the road. It's so simple, but it's also really satisfying. Right, baby?
And it's cheap.
And it's cheap! Yeah.
And it's better for us.
Yeah.
We eat healthier.
So now I gotta go check on Qubie. I always make it a point to check on Qubie to make sure that nobody has messed with my toe stuff while we've been eating. So let's go take a look at Qubie. Alright. Hey Qubie. Always check my ready brake. Looks good. And all my pins still in. Sweet. Yeah. Just something pleasant about it. Alright. Let's go do the last part of this trip. A good question you may be asking right now is, why Fayetteville, Indiana? That's reasonable. At just under 700 miles from us, it's definitely not the closest destination. It also isn't precisely a tourist mecca, no offense to what I'm sure is a delightful city. We're going for one very special reason that's been years in the making, but to explain that reason, I have to detour just a little bit. While thinking about the content we wanted to make for this channel, I'd wanted to do a Why Qubie video, including our top 3 things we love about her and the top 3 things we'd like to improve. Catherine and I discussed this a lot during this trip, and we both agree on most of the things we'd include on each of those lists. Where we really agree is the number one thing we wish we could improve: the ride and the handling. We've had Qubie for 6 years, and I perform every handling improvement I could find. Before we even bought her, we had sumo springs installed at the factory. I had the dealership install a steering stabilizer before we picked her up, both to help with steering stability as well as safety in the event of a steer tire blowout. It only took a few longer trips to realize that I should install a rear track bar on Qubie to help reduce rear tail wag and sway both from wind and from passing trucks, so I did that about 7 months into ownership. About a year into owning Qubie, I decided to try changing shocks. I'd heard great things about Coney FSD shocks from other owners, so I ordered a front and rear set and installed them. A lot of people discussed the improvement from changing to these shocks as night and day, which honestly seems to be a common refrain on most improvements. But we felt it was more of a slight improvement over the stock Bilstein shocks that came with Qubie. Okay, here's the thing. The Ford F53 chassis that Qubie and all the other open road models are based on is really still just a heavy truck chassis. Qubie is roughly 22,000 pounds of RV, and she runs on a bog standard leaf spring and shock suspension. Leaf springs are about the oldest tech imaginable for RV and heavy truck chassis. I looked it up. They were invented in 1804. Now, I'm sure they've made improvements since that date, but the fact remains that it's a rudimentary suspension carrying a lot of weight with a non-aerodynamic box that's 13 feet tall. And it handles like it. It sways, it rolls, the house makes a lot of noise as you're going down the road. It's just not the most comfortable ride in existence. Now, I've actually gotten quite comfortable driving Qubie over the past 6 years. I've gotten used to her idiosyncrasies. I get her road feel. I love the view over the road that I have. And honestly, Kat has grown comfortable with me driving. She no longer feels like we're going to careen off the road and die in a fire on the side of the road. Now, a lot of Kat's fear comes from how she observes me driving Qubie. I'm having to be very engaged, very actively steering. Whenever we're going over very rough roads or a lot of road construction, there's a lot of jouncing and bouncing, and it feels like we're on the brink of disaster a lot of the time. And I'm sure some of you that have driven similar coaches in the past can at least understand where that impression comes from. They're simple, rudimentary chassis at their root. And Kat won't really drive her. She's terrified. She doesn't think she can control her, and she really still feels like if she drives, we're gonna die on the side of the road in a fire. So that's where we are today. I've done everything that I can to Qubie to make her handle better, control better, and ride better, both for our comfort and our safety. But honestly, we've still found her wanting. It's just not as comfortable or as controllable as we feel like she has the potential to be. So this is why we find ourselves on the road to Lafayette, Indiana, the home of Liquid Springs. I've had my eyes on Liquid Springs class suspension for almost 3 years now. A big player in suspension systems for the mining and ambulance industries, they're relatively new to the RV industry and produced a very well-regarded replacement rear suspension for the F53 chassis. I got to drive a friend's open road last year that just had the rear suspension installed, and it was an amazing difference. Liquid Springs announced that they were working on a full front and rear replacement in late 2019, so my hopes started building from there. As it did in so many ways, COVID-19 impacted Liquid Springs' release plans considerably, since I had originally heard late Q1 of 2020. But at this point, they're now installing that full front and rear suspension replacement. After some heartfelt discussions, Catherine and I decided that it was an investment that made sense to us for our continued enjoyment of Qubie, especially now that Julia is heading to college and Catherine and I are looking at taking more and longer trips. So, we booked an install at the Liquid Springs facility in Lafayette, Indiana, and waited impatiently for our install date to arrive. And here we are. I guess I really haven't answered one big question. What is Liquid Springs, and why am I interested? Liquid Springs came up with something they call the class suspension. That's an acronym, and let's take it one part at a time. The CL at the beginning stands for compressible liquid. That liquid provides the basis for the strut in the Liquid Springs suspension to dampen the movements of the coach. As a compressible liquid, it can compress to accept load and expand when that load is removed. The two S's at the end stand, perhaps predictably, for suspension system. That leaves the most important letter in the middle, A. A stands for adaptive, and that letter right there is the complete game changer for suspensions. Let's start with the strut. It looks a whole lot like a shock absorber because it is one in essence. We know it has this compressible liquid in it, and it can move up and down based on the compressible liquid volume that it sees, which, for now, means the volume inside the strut. However, the strut is also attached to what is called the secondary volume, which is a fancy term for a big old container of fluid. How does that help? Well, the missing piece of the puzzle is that there's a valve between the strut and the secondary volume that can open and close very quickly that changes the effective volume that the piston inside the strut sees. If that valve is completely closed, the strut is at its stiffest setting, and only the compressible nature of the liquid inside the strut is what's providing the dampening characteristics. If that valve is completely open, now the strut sees the entire volume of liquid in that secondary volume as part of its volume. This makes the strut the squishiest it can get. So with one strut and a change in whether the valve is open or closed, you can have an incredibly stiff shock or an incredibly squishy shock, or anywhere in between. You can probably see where I'm going with this. You can probably see where I'm going with all this. If you attach a computer to that strut valve and let it control how much that valve opens and closes, and then you feed it all the information about the driving parameters, from the steering position to the position of the pedals, the speed, give it all the forces that are acting on the RV at any time, body position and roll, and you let it calculate new positions for that valve hundreds of times a second. Now you've got a system that adapts to the road and the driving conditions in ways that every other suspension system can't do. And these calculations and adjustments are happening at each corner for every wheel. The unit also coordinates the responses between all four of the wheels together, so that, for instance, if there's unacceptable body roll happening, it can use all four corners to team up and eliminate the roll entirely. There's simply no other solution at any price point that has similar capabilities. I mean, clearly, the class system should beat the stock F53 chassis on paper any day of the week. All of the components I described above, from the leaf springs to the shocks, even the sumo springs, all statically dampen the movement in some way. The leaf springs absorb energy and motion by flexing the metal. The shock absorbers compress and expand based on the piston moving inside a volume of gas or liquid. Even the sumo springs are just a different static way of absorbing energy by either squishing or expanding, and it's all just static systems. Here's perhaps my most controversial take. I think the class system, at least on paper, should beat even high-end diesel pushers for controllability and handling, and even, dare I say, comfort. Those big cushy diesels aren't magic. The air ride suspensions that they ride on are pretty easy to understand. They replace the leaf spring suspension with just a big bag of air. It's still a static system. Contrast that with the class system, compressible, liquid, adaptive suspension system. Let's imagine going over a simple bump with a single wheel. We approach it, and the class system is in a steady state where it's got some default set of parameters for the valve that gives it some sort of damping factor. Now, we hit that bump, boop, and the system detects it and might lower the damping factor so that it absorbs that bump, boom, so that we feel it less. Now, as we reach the top of that motion, it might start feathering the system so that it starts reaching toward that default point again, so that it's adapting to the conditions. Now, picture that same thing across all four wheels over all of the bumps that are happening hundreds of times a second, and working together also to dramatically reduce all of the larger movements that combine to form what that giant moving box is doing across the road. That's an adaptive system. I feel like it's got to be better than, even like I said, any of the more expensive static systems. The only remaining question is, does the liquid spring class system deliver? So to find that out, I find myself driving to Lafayette, Indiana, giving up my coach for a week, writing a pretty substantial check in order to find out. So let's get there. The sun, we think, has risen over here in northwestern Indiana. Very exciting night. Had to pull the slides in for the first time in 6 years because of weather. I really thought we were gonna get a tornado coming through here. It's still kind of ugly today, as maybe you can tell. But today we dropped Qubie off, and hopefully improve the one thing that we dislike the most about her. Guy's moving it, man. Which is the handling. And having the 4-corner liquid springs installed over the week. I'm so excited. I mean, you saw some of that footage of us driving up here, and now we get to drive back. Of course, you know, the roads won't be identical, eastbound, westbound, northbound, southbound, but should give us a pretty good indication of exactly how much improvement we can expect, and I'm very much looking forward to it. All right, see you in a little while.
One week later.
I'd love to say I'm not nervous, but I'm nervous. We're back at Liquid Springs. We're in their nice, comfortable customer lounge. Qubie is right over my shoulder, still up in the air in the bay. A little bit of a, I guess, difficulty with the exhaust system, maybe run a different way than they had seen, so they actually had to fabricate a new tailpipe. But soon, hopefully, I'll get to see Qubie, drive Qubie, and fingers crossed that this is the improvement that we've been looking for drivability and comfort. Oh, but do I have butterflies? I have butterflies. We'll see in a little bit.
Now we can do...
Do you have any questions?
No.
Oh, please.
We can do a test drive.
Yeah.
So up here we'll come out, turn to the right. So.
Okay. I feel like Robin Williams. Did you ever see the movie RV? Yes. With Robin
Oh,
Williams?
it's so funny.
Fighting the... Oh, please.
Yeah, I don't drive this thing, so I'm hoping that maybe I can drive it.
So right now we're in comfort.
Yep.
Okay. Oh.
I mean, you sure already noticed the difference by now. So.
Yeah.
I can tell
Oh.
the difference already.
Okay.
And then we'll go left and then right.
Babe. Oh, that didn't sound good. What was that?
Don't know.
Eric? What was
I
that?
don't know. It sounded like it was like right behind me though.
Sounds like something was popping.
Right here.
Oh,
I said left and right.
sorry. But I mean that it took that pretty well.
Yeah.
I'm not being like...
But right now, if you want to go ahead and swerve a little, you're in comfort, so you get a feel of it. So you can kind of feel the body roll.
Yeah.
And we're good. Now you can try to sport.
What?
Yeah.
What?
differences.
Oh my god! What? You have to get a kick out of people's reactions.
I do.
This is insane.
This is a pretty sharp turn.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You are good.
I've had
But
some
even
couple
this-
people scare me through here, so I always tell people this is a sharp.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know it was quite that sharp. Let me go back. This is the.
That's normal, so it's somewhere in between.
Okay. Yeah, a little more roll.
Yep.
I'm just trying to get the pavement hits and see if there's any real substantial difference between those. I'm gonna go back to sport.
There's not when you're
No,
going
no, this
straight.
is comfort.
Yeah. When you're going straight, there is no difference.
Do you hear though? Do you hear the house?
That's a really good point. There's not the
First
banging.
of all, that road is not like it has all those
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Normally we
Yeah.
would feel that.
Oh, that's a really good point. And we would hear everything crunching up
Yeah.
here.
That's what we get. The biggest thing we get told is the noise right away. Most people, that's the first thing they notice.
Oh, it's much quieter.
And then we'll turn right.
Okay.
I feel like you're driving a sports car instead of an RV.
I gotta try the. That's just this. That is crazy. Because it would. I mean, it would feel
The
like.
whole thing would
Yeah,
feel like it's,
you would be like, wah,
yeah.
Like there's one particular gas station that I use outside of a campground that we use all the time. I exit at like 2 miles an hour because it's got such a crown on it.
Yeah.
And everything just goes. I really feel like I'm gonna fall over.
Right where this white fence will turn left.
Oh, okay. Like there's some imperfections on this road,
Oh yeah.
but
It gets worse on this road.
it doesn't feel anywhere near what it used to.
No.
I'm gonna go back
It's
to comfort.
super quiet.
I'm gonna go back to normal.
You're like a kid.
Wow. Like
Yeah,
all these little bounces.
Normally, when you turn, like I'm in this chair, it hasn't moved. It's not even tied down really well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this road is a little rougher. It's got deeper ruts in it. And then this bridge is coming up. Hit, I guess, at about 40, 45 miles an hour.
Oh, does it have a lip on it?
Both sides.
Is this the one?
You're like,
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, I tell everybody that goes on this road, hit it about 40, 45 miles an hour, and you'll see the difference.
You know the difference is I can hear the chunk, but I don't feel it necessarily.
Okay.
Or I do, but it's very, very minimal. It's not like a whole
All
lot.
right, keep it, get up and go.
Oh, they repaved this section right here.
I'm gonna scare Eric.
And normal, it leans a little bit more.
Yeah.
Is it hard to keep on the road?
No.
Does it feel different? Does that feel different?
There you go.
felt like a Dukes of Hazzard jump before this. Am I going
Yeah.
left?
Yeah.
Okay. Wouldn't it, hun?
Oh, definitely.
No, we probably would have broken half the house
Half
on
the
that.
house, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it practically floats over those types of things. I can't see.
Not
Right.
see. Scoot up the car. Oh, that one's her.
Oh, what manners and turns.
That was good.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we don't touch any of the rack or pinion or anything like that. We just take the front shocks off, front springs.
It's crazy how much different the steering does feel, though.
We get that.
Like
Yeah.
all of those meanderings and stuff from that really bad road in the past. Like the steering wheel was just unaffected, and my steering was unaffected. Am I going 65 south?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh no, we're on 50. Are we on 52?
No, we're on 38.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very different.
It literally just goes like this. It's crazy. Now the $20,000 question. Is liquid springs worth it? Well, our test drive of Qubie with the 4-corner liquid springs was pretty stunning, and our drive home served to confirm our initial impressions. Qubie was more comfortable, more controllable, and less noisy from house impacts and stresses by far. There are a few memorable things from our test drive worth mentioning specifically. That whoop-de-doo across the overpass was amazing, and everyone's senses made us both laugh and cheer. In the past, those types of things caused some of the most wild dips and sways, but now Qubie just traverses them with no drama. I've tried really hard since to come up with the correct description, but it's really difficult. It's not floating because that has some negative connotations, but it's close. It's really an unflappable, graceful, measured, and considered traversal over the road, regardless of condition. Similarly, that railroad crossing later where I mentioned the Dukes of Hazzard was something memorable. You might be able to tell from the video, but it caught me a bit off guard. I didn't realize how much of a bump there was over the tracks, and I had an instant to think and say, uh-oh, before taking it. But Qubie just handled it with no drama and maximum controllability. The side-to-side control with sport mode is just nuts. It feels like we're disobeying physical laws. I'm sending a 22,000-pound behemoth back and forth, and it just doesn't feel possible for it to act the way it does without a crane holding us from the top or something. I can only imagine the confidence and sure-footedness that this system would offer when emergency maneuvers are required. I'll relate one other memorable and honestly very scary situation that we encountered on our way home. Just outside Cincinnati, we entered a construction zone, and they included concrete barriers on both sides of the road with very narrow lanes while they shifted the traffic around. We entered a sweeping left, and a bridge over an interchange came quickly into view. I was in the right-hand lane and had time to see a dip only on the passenger side as we were coming to the entrance to a bridge crossing. Kat saw it at the same time I did and started to exclaim, and my eyes widened a bit, and then poof, we were on it. That's how quick it was. It just came out of nowhere, and then we were there and we were gonna run over this dip. And so we did. We hit it, and there was movement, but Qubie stayed controllable. We felt the movement, and then it smoothed out, and we just went about our way. That's very different from the way it has ever been whenever we've hit similar things in the past. There was a thing that we used to call the Raleigh roller coaster, which was the belt line around Raleigh 440 had been under construction for years while they tried to expand the lanes. And the surface was just rough and varied, and lanes changed, and it was uneven, and it really felt like a roller coaster in Qubie. Like, we just felt all the time that it was just this bouncing ride. And this was similar and had the potential to like be much worse, because with the way the dip was just on that passenger side and a bridge abutment like right there, you know, in Qubie of old, it would have felt like we were going to bash into that bridge because it just kind of bounces uncontrollably. Whereas this time, we just went through it. That's the best way to explain it. It was so undramatic in comparison.
It's bad. Yeah.
All right, well, yeah, that bad. Okay.
What was this like on the way down?
This was worth cursing.
It was brutal. It was brutal.
It was brutal. Yeah, look at that truck's axles bouncing.
Yeah.
And us, we're just, I mean, there's some, you can feel some movement, but it's nowhere near the impacts that we got before. Bring it on, 52.
Well, and I think that one of the most telling things is just how quiet the house is.
Yep.
You can hear a few creaks.
Yeah, but none of those sharp,
No.
crunchy, really solid bangs. Oh, this should be good. Oh yeah. Look at how it handles the
Uneven
off
pavement.
kilter stuff. Yeah. Totally controllable.
Yeah, I'm gonna record you for a bit.
Yeah. This is fun. This is a lot more fun than the ride up on leaf springs and shocks. I'll say that much. Because it's like unflappable. Like, we've hit some really big things, and in the past that would have felt like Qubie was going to fly off the road. Now I always have a good feeling of control. So I think that's my favorite thing. More so than the ride. Yeah, look at this is bad. This would have had us cussing.
Big
Oh
ones.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Honestly
nothing.
feel like it feels better than it would in a car. You know what I mean? Like, I feel we get So I've had Liquid Springs now for a few weeks, and I think the biggest improvement is in the handling. I think I've used the word unflappable before, and that's the best way to describe it. We've been on some very rough roads on the trip home and since then, and Qubie really feels almost more sports car-like than RV-like at this point, at least in terms of handling. I feel like my safety and the safety of the people that ride with me have increased immeasurably. Stability from wind and from trucks passing is better than even when I had the rear track bar installed. Like, I don't even notice trucks anymore unless I see them. It's just a non-event again. There was a time this past weekend when I was driving out to our local lake, and I was in traffic and had pulled up to a light, and I could see that the wind was kicking up closer toward the lake, and it really felt like a microburst, actually. Very strong wind. I could see the trees bending ahead of me, almost like 45 degrees, and I was like, oh boy, here it comes. And it did. The wind came closer, and then we found ourselves in this microburst situation. I think people were thinking there were tornadoes coming, and that's kind of the precursor to it, right? And I could hear the wind blowing around Qubie. Again, it's an unaerodynamic box, right? You're gonna hear the wind hitting the side. But Qubie just sat there and took it. Like, I could feel a little bit of movement, but I tell you, I've been on the side of the road, like in the turn lane, waiting to turn into our campground at our lake. And that turn lane is right next to a line of traffic that's going 55 miles an hour. And I've been sitting at that traffic light in Qubie while trucks and everything else go blasting past me at 55 miles an hour. And it buffets more than you would ever expect a 22,000 pound vehicle to move. Like, you can just, it's startling. This now is similarly just not there. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm in peace, and I might hear them and there might be a little bit of movement, but the Liquid Springs just controls that movement and damps it down to where you just don't notice it. Qubie is definitely quieter and more comfortable, but if I'm being honest, my expectations were super high for the comfort part, and I don't think they were quite met. I was hoping for a magic carpet ride that would allow me some road feel, but otherwise soak up every imperfection in the road and make it feel like I was in an immovable, isolated bubble where I didn't feel anything except good things. And I didn't get that. But I don't know that that's necessarily achievable in any suspension system. What I did get is a much smoother ride and a much quieter house and a lot more peace on the road. I feel things, but it's not as much, and it's far more comfortable and controllable. And I think that's the key aspect. If I feel like I have more control and more drivability and more predictability, that honestly puts me at ease, makes me relax more, and therefore makes everything more comfortable. It's like not a vicious circle, but a good circle. Qubie now soaks up bumps big and small, and the big house-shaking movements of the past seem to be history. I can only imagine how much better this must be for all the systems in the house to not get shaken constantly while on the road. I feel like my maintenance costs over time will go down. Now, being involved in the Tiffin Open Roaders group on Facebook, I hear a lot of people express the thought that they're perfectly happy with the way their coaches drive and the way they feel. And they're like, Why should I buy Liquid Springs? What's in it for me? Why should I upgrade? Now, there's a lot to unpack in that question, but I think there's one simple thing at its root. People's opinions or thoughts about how their coach drives are very subjective. And given the variety of coaches, the different models, the different weights, the different wheelbases, and also people's experience driving over their lifetime, makes it so that it's almost impossible to agree on whether any particular coach is drivable to a person except for what that person thinks. Honestly, if someone tells me they love the way their coach drives and therefore they think that Liquid Springs isn't worth it, I couldn't agree more. It definitely isn't worth investing money into something that already meets your expectations. Now, I've had people ask whether it's worth it to upgrade to the full four-corner system if your coach already has just the rear Liquid Springs. That's a harder question to answer. I've only ridden in a coach with the rear Liquid Springs option once, and it was for about a 20-25 minute road trip that my friend Bill was gracious enough to let me try. And that ride blew my mind enough to make me really excited for the full four-corner system. But unfortunately, it's been long enough and my experience was so brief that it's really hard for me to recall precisely how different that rear-only suspension was to either the pre-Liquid Springs Qubie or my current four-corner Liquid Springs. I feel like the rear suspension on our coaches is responsible for the majority of the ride characteristics, which only makes sense because they carry most of the weight of the motorhome. However, given the improved steering feel that I've experienced with my four corners and the fact that they can work in concert, all four corners, to reduce those gross rolls that the entire coach does, I feel like it could be worth it to those people who have the rear Liquid Springs but feel like there's something more out there. I suspect there is, and if you can, I would suggest trying to find someone that will give you a test drive of their four-corner model. Maybe that's Liquid Springs, maybe that's a friend, maybe that's me. I'm available, but I think that's the only way you're going to find out because, again, this is all very subjective. What's worth it to me might not be worth it to someone else. So, my final thoughts on the Liquid Springs four-corner suspension upgrade. I think we finally found our night and day F53 chassis suspension improvement because we've replaced the entire thing. We got rid of all of that previously described rudimentary suspension and put in its place what I consider and I think is the most advanced suspension available on any truck chassis. It is definitely a complete game changer. Yes, the cost is far more expensive than any other upgrade available for our coaches. But I think for that price, you now have a coach that compares favorably with coaches that cost 2, 3, even 4 times as much. For those owners who love their F53 based coaches, but wish that they had more drivability and more comfort, and think that upgrading to a diesel pusher is really the only path to get there, I feel like the Liquid Springs class system is definitely a compelling option that shouldn't be ignored. For us, we are completely satisfied with our investment. We've waffled in the past over our future path with RVing. Would we keep Qubie? Would we upgrade to a diesel? Would we downgrade to something like a leisure travel vans? But now with this Liquid Springs upgrade, we already loved Qubie. We loved everything about her except for that comfort and that drivability, which I feel like now we have. So I think Qubie, as she stands now with the Liquid Springs 4-corner upgrade, will meet our needs now and into the future. And I couldn't be more excited to take some more trips and get out there and explore some of America's worst roads and just laugh whenever we're driving over them. Anyhow, thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to comment. I'm happy to answer. If you liked it, please subscribe and follow our travel adventures as we move forward. Thanks.
Howdy.
Literally crawling to the tunnel. It's not a walker tunnel, it's a crawler tunnel.
Yo, this tunnel bullshit. We're literally gonna pop out the other end and just be like, okay, everybody go! And that's really confusing to me. There was nothing that should have made it so that we had that giant delay. Okay. Wild and wonderful. West Virginia. West Virginia mountain home. I don't know the song.
I'm just gonna make them throw up whenever they watch this.
I'm recording. I'm just trying to record a "we got your message."
Press the wrong.
I'm trying to think of what I want to say. I tell you what.